Tonight, socialism is terrifying to Americans. Or is it? Find out tonight on America, the Podcast, the animated series.
Hello, America! It's America, the Podcast!
You were a Republican for a long time, right?
Indeed, I am still very much a fiscal conservative, but as our podcast listeners turned cartoon viewers know, I left the grand old party in December 2017 after it was clear they went full mustache man with their whole America First thing.
Which seems like something you'd be into.
Well, I obviously love the name, but they meant white America and no one else. While I do believe we are the greatest nation on Earth, isolationism is not only fruitless, but bad for capitalism and usually pretty racist.
What do you consider yourself now?
Well, I consider myself the embodiment of and only hope for America, but politically I consider myself an independent. But if I had to put a label on it, I'd say I am a social libertarian.
That sounds made up.
Well, so is Santa Claus, and you know him personally.
Fair enough. So, how are you a social libertarian?
Well, my friend, I believe in individual freedom for everyone, which includes freedom from violence. And since violence itself can take many painful forms, I am an advocate for things like firearm control and universal health care, as well as universal college and housing, all of which lead to my pro-capitalism mentality.
How so?
Well, if a society is healthy, fed, housed, and educated, the end result is more innovation, which leads to more useful and useless goods and services, which then adds trillions to an economy, which then puts more and more money into my deep, deep pockets. I also have a Bitcoin wallet.
But all of those things require taxes. You hate taxes.
Of course, I'm still a proud, greedy American. I was even offered an orange lantern ring once, but I only served the red, white, and blue.
Rage, life, and hope?
What? No, America, you fool! And irregardless of not liking taxes, I still pay my fair share despite being one of the founders of our great nation. You'd think I'd get some sort of a tax break.
You do! You rich assholes get a ton of tax breaks, which is one of the many reasons why we the people can't afford any of that stuff.
Indeed, which is why my libertarian side isn't totally anti-tax. It's just simply pro-correct tax allocation. Meaning, I am an adult, specifically 249 years young, and I understand that not only does a country need money to function, but that money also must be collected through taxation. And once it has been collected, it should be spent wisely and not on useless killing machines and even more useless wars that reduce the number of people who spend money. I also understand that taxing a poor person at a higher rate than someone with billions more in their bank account makes as much sense as taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich.
That wasn't a metaphor. You just described the situation.
Indeed, a metaphor is pointless when said situation is already beyond moronic. It's abundantly clear that taxing billionaires like me at even a marginally higher rate would do wonders for our economy, create huge amounts of wealth, and would simply be a boon to capitalism itself. Also, paying women equally would help too.
That may be the most greedy way to describe democratic socialism I've ever heard.
That's why I call it social libertarianism, my friend. It's all about the branding, you see. Right-wing conservatives and politically inactive Americans are still too afraid of big, scary socialism in its various forms, so calling it social libertarianism might just woo their greedy and/or uninformed little minds.
So you're just sugarcoating socialist policies?
More like covering it in ketchup, since the right wing doesn't have the political palate to appreciate the fine steak of socialism put before them. Which brings me to my long-running segment, Did You Know This?
I'm hungry now.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a steak later. America, did you know this? Did you know that Americans aren't as scared of socialism as the metaphorical they would have the metaphorical us believe? That's right. Sure, there are those who believe socialism is evil and un-American, but those are good old-fashioned American myths that I'll get to in a moment, because I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that many Americans either endorse socialist policies outright, or simply like the policies under different names while being told socialism is evil by these same politicians their fathers and grandfathers voted for in the past. Simply put, socialism can be, and usually is a good thing, especially in its evolved form, democratic socialism. Almost every modern liberal society in some form or another has instituted socialist policies successfully. But then again, there are of course those few instances of evil governments that have also done the same thing. It's kind of like the broken clock scenario, except that one German clock was very broken and of course, racist. The Germans seem to be doing fine now, though. Their government has not only become incredibly anti-mustache man, but through their modern socialist policies, they managed to take care of all of their citizens and then some. Modern socialist policies that are again in almost every modern society on the planet, including these United States. When you share this episode with your MAGA family, they will likely begin shouting, "Socialism leads to breadlines and corruption," and they would sort of be correct. Many societies simply didn't get socialism right originally, and there are a few who still don't. But as decades went on, any society that implemented universal healthcare, full maternity leave, and housing simply came to understand that keeping the people even moderately happy also keeps them from burning down your capital and overthrowing your government. Almost every one of our allies have socialist policies and even entire democratic socialist governments. You don't see breadlines in England, France, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, or Canada because they figured it out and have given the world a blueprint. And yes, there are some like Venezuela who used that socialist blueprint for corruption, but one could easily argue and win said argument that capitalism has led to more corruption and poverty than socialism or its policies have in any developed nation. Despite the deep lore about the dangers of socialism, policies like housing and healthcare for all, fully funded public education, and universal basic income are more popular than they've ever been, with 62% of young adults favoring socialism, and even capitalism's own favorability rating itself at an all-time low with adults as a whole. And the love of those policies and politicians that promote them is apparent across these United States. The recent Democratic sweep across the country, including the wins from Governors-elect Abigail Spanberger of Virginia and Mickey Sherrill of New Jersey, signaled that the majority of Americans are cooling on the right-wing establishment. A fact that was made abundantly clear with 2025's most notable political victor, New York's mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani. When he began his mayoral journey, he was polling at 1%, but by the end, he won with one of the highest turnouts in the city's history. Billionaires like myself spent over $20 million during the election cycle trying to prevent Zoran from winning while supporting a man who not only lost to him in the primary, but had originally resigned as the governor of New York after allegations of sexual assault from multiple women, one of whom's medical records he'd tried to subpoena. Full disclosure, the political pendulum is so clearly plummeting hard and fast back toward the left that we wrote the majority of this episode before Mamdani won, fully expecting his win as well as the Democrats' cross-country sweep. Granted, we didn't write the rest of the episode until these wins were official since we didn't want to jinx any of them. I did suggest using my trusted psychic Pokemon Jinx to teleport voters to the polls across the country, but we feared it might violate some sort of election law if we did. Clearly, Mayor-elect Mamdani and the other Democrats didn't need it though, since again, the city of New York showed up in record numbers while others across the country showed up to spite Trump and fight for progress in their communities. Second full disclosure, we wrote that entire bit before the election as well. What part of this episode didn't we write before the election? You will never know.
We were really only waiting for the final election results.
Don't give it away!
But it's true. We were confident because, like you said, the pendulum has clearly begun to swing back the other way. So much so that Trump keeps calling Zoran a communist instead of a socialist, since socialism isn't unpopular anymore.
You are indeed correct, my friend, and the progressive wins across the country have proved that point in abundance, especially as Americans have grown tired of the status quo. While the right wing tries to reconcile their working man beliefs as well as the newest revelations regarding Jeffrey Epstein, their God King parties his deformed nuts off at the hotels he owns. Meanwhile, the flawed yet maturing Democrats are trying to change their party and now have a path forward, just as long as they don't drop the ball. Oh, wait, Chuck Schumer beefed it by allegedly having a few Democrats cave to the GOP.
We wrote that part after the election.
Indeed. If you, the American people, want change and policies put in place that will benefit you, your family, and your neighbors, then you must demand it and stop putting politicians and their wealthy donors on some sort of pedestal. Billionaires in the so-called ruling class and the politicians they buy consistently advocate for policies that do not benefit the many, only the few, especially them. Cutting taxes on the rich objectively does not lead to anything good for the people, yet that is what the majority of you have been spoon-fed your entire life. It is what your parents, their parents before them, and theirs before them were all fed as well. A billionaire's greatest trick is convincing folks they, the billionaire, are not out to screw over you, the people. Simply put, billionaires do not care about you. As a billionaire, I could care less about what any of you say or do, especially if I'm watching anything Muppet-related. My 1% billionaire brethren sit on riches that, if combined, would make them the third wealthiest nation on Earth, while the world starves and dies around them, despite the fact that their wealth could end world poverty many times over. Some even banded together to get one of their friends elected as leader of the free world to enrich themselves even further and party without consequence, all while expecting you to love them in return for the privilege of watching them eat the cake that you can't have because, in their paraphrased words, you're too lazy to get to where they are, despite most, if not all of them, reaching their tax bracket via generational wealth or something similar, our president included. My conservative siblings need to understand that socialism doesn't mean wasting money. I, too, just learned that this line of thought is one of the most common misconceptions around. Aside from its ability to provide our nation with the soft power it needs to stay in control while providing a positive way to promote our nation's interests, socialist policies aim to spend money wisely, just not in the way the rich and powerful would like. As people begin to stop experiencing hunger, poverty, and mass amounts of stress, they begin to see things clearly and as they are. The right-wing leadership gaslights their supporters into thinking it's in their best interest to throw money at an ever-increasing military budget, which hasn't passed an audit in years, or that it's wise to give tax cuts to the rich while cutting food stamps and healthcare for the poor. Meanwhile, progressives simply want to tax the rich to pay for things that benefit everyone, like the aforementioned food stamps, healthcare, housing, and just general relief from poverty. You may try and argue with me, but I won't hear of it. Mostly because I'm a cartoon on your smart device, but also because your argument will either be that of a straw man or one that simply is misinformed. And as a policy, those arguments won't receive a response, simply because teaching you in the comments is not worth our time. Just rewatch this perfect cartoon episode if you want my perfect response to your retort. And not to sound like a total elitist, oh, who am I kidding? I love sounding elitist. I just used the word retort. But your hate of socialism is more than likely fueled by your disdain of the social issues that are accepted within modern democratic socialism and a liberal society. Because if I, a cartoon billionaire, aka an image of something you have come to worship, can't convince you to love and accept trans people and immigrants whilst acknowledging that poverty is a stain on our country and the human race, then I doubt anything will convince you. Maybe I could pull some strings and get Bugs Bunny to do an explainer dressed as a sexy lady a la The Big Short, but that probably wouldn't be very constructive, although it would be very arousing. Did you know this?
It's America, the podcast.
You know everything you said makes you sound like a democratic socialist, right?
I still don't like the name. What about champagne socialist?
That doesn't mean what you think it does, but I guess it does technically apply to you.
Can I at least call myself a conservative to my friends?
Who are your friends?
Well, Peter Thiel and I used to hunt panda bears together, but now he's all into the Antichrist or something. I occasionally play golf with Jeff Bezos and his friend Bees, who I'm pretty sure is just the demon Beelzebub. Oh, I occasionally use Larry Ellison's pool on the weekends as we talk shop.
Those are some of the worst people in America. You need to get new friends, dude.
Well, we're more just members of the same Illuminati blood cult rather than friends. Although I should probably stop playing online Settlers of Catan with Mohammed bin Salman and Rupert Murdoch. But then whom would I practice my capitalism skills with? It's a real pickle.
You would find a way to ruin Catan for people, wouldn't you?
Indeed I could, and indeed I did. Thanks for watching, America. We'll be back again for our War on Christmas Spectacular in December with a very special guest. It's Jesus. We booked Jesus. Don't forget to subscribe to America, the podcast presents on YouTube for our cartoon episodes and sketches, and be sure to check out our news channel, Cute News. You can also follow the audio version of this perfect podcast on your favorite podcast app. The links for everything are in the description. I will be back in your eyes and ears again soon, America. For now, and as always, good night and good fight.
It's America, the podcast.